Howdy, folks! Happy Wednesday, happy Hump Day. I am on, I'd say, about 500 cc's of caffeine after getting home last night late, like 2 o'clock in the morning. One good thing about that, Russ, and we'll talk about this game. I most of the trip back to Buffalo, I was listening to the LA Kings radio broadcast of the overtime of the third period in the overtime of the Edmonton LA game, and it was. I mean, there's something to be said about listening to things on the radio.
Jim Fox.
Daryl Evans, I think it was Jim Fox and Daryl.
Yeah, that's a good combo. They're very good.
Yeah, they're the veteran guys, and they weren't like pom waving Kings home.
No, they call it right down. I like them.
Yeah, but it was nice to listen to a radio broadcast, and obviously I couldn't focus on a TV broadcast driving back. I want to keep my eyes on the road, but listening to the radio broadcast was cool. But we'll talk about that game in a little bit. We should have Kevin Allen and Eck joining us any moment. Russ, start us off with the pre-show.
Yeah, so it's interesting when athletes, are on social media and they want to sort of be the king of social media. So, when they're on your team, you're like, all right, you put up with it. Well, Noah Syndergaard used to do that with the Mets all the time, and they used to roll their eyes. Management did, some fans did. I didn't care that much, and I still don't care too much now. But the interesting thing is, the Mets had that combined no-hitter the other day, and the Angels pitched one last night. So Syndergaard decided to go onto Instagram, post a picture and said, hey, this is great. And then in a little text, put, this is what a real no-hitter looks like. So it's, throwing shade on the Mets.
Right.
And it's like the Mets didn't say it was a real no-hitter. It just was a combined no-hitter. So then Max Scherzer gets involved, and he goes, hey, Noah, if you want to see what a real ring looks like, come over next time we play it. So, it's like.
Oh, and did you see the further statement? He says,
no.
That halo over your head, meaning because he's with the Angels, is like the closest thing that you're going to get to a ring, or closest thing.
Right.
Yeah, something like that. I'm paraphrasing, but yeah, no, it was definitely some shade.
It's just bizarre land because like Scherzer's a brand new Met. I appreciate the fact that he's sticking up for his team, and then it's like Syndergaard, like you've been gone for like 10 minutes and you're already trashing your old team. Like this is the world we're in now. It's just funny.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff. Go ahead, go. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, I wanted to add something here in the pre-show, just because, I say often that I tell the story of Russ criticizing Rick DiPietro's pants. And what I often say is that, I've been alive a long time, and Russ is the only man I've ever heard discuss another man's pants. And I was watching baseball, flicking around in games, and I got to the end of a guy telling a story about how the guy was they always often wore multicolored pants.
Yes.
And he was telling the story of this, and I thought, oh my God, I can no longer say Russ is the only man that I've ever heard discussing another man's pants, although he didn't criticize them with them. He just said they were memorable. So
I have to put myself in this cat. I never discussed it, but I did sort of comment on it like I comment on anything. In Buffalo, there and I think in a lot of the like NFL cities, they have what are called Zuba pants. They're like the multi-striped colored, and in Buffalo they're particularly popular. I don't know why. They're just ugly. I mean, they're an eyesore. But like I years ago when I was in a bowling league, and one of the teams, some teams will get the same T-shirts. These guys all had the Zuba pants, and I'm like, it was like a visual atrocity. It was just like an abomination. And I didn't comment on it other than to my teammates. And like, thank God we don't do that kind of stuff.
We should mention this. There's a combination tie-in here, but the great Bob Lanier died, and he played.
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
Yeah,
I remember watching him when I was a kid. He was a really great offensive center. Like, he wasn't the biggest guy, but man, he could shoot. He was actually one of those centers that could shoot from everywhere.
He was pretty big for that era.
I think he was 6'10" or 6'11".
Yeah, 6'11". But obviously, I saw him because he was a Piston,
right?
And very popular. And oftentimes we use a phrase when someone passed away, that they were a better man than they were an athlete. But in Bob's case, I think it was true. I mean, I didn't cover him, but the impression you got from reading about him is that he was just a fine guy, and was popular here in Detroit, even though the Pistons teams from that era were not very good.
No, but he could fill it. He could fill it up though.
Well,
he was a good player.
He was a Buffalo native. He went to St. Bonaventure, so a Western New York legend. I remember him when he was with the Milwaukee Bucks in the late 70s and early 80s when they faced Boston and Philadelphia. Yeah, he was a great player. So it's sad. It's only
because I knew Ted would know.
So. Only 73 years old. But okay, we can start. I got something off the top I want to touch on.
Okay, cool. I'm right here. I'm right here. Sorry, I'm here. Sorry, just in the middle of doing.
Yeah, no. You can get
nothing going
on.
on. Everything's crazy. I apologize. Okay, here we go. Ready?
Yep.
Oh, what day is it? Hello, Hockey World. Hey, Hockey World. It is Wednesday. It's Wednesday, May 11th, 2022.
I'm Michael Agello, and obviously Eck hasn't looked at the calendar I sent him for his birthday.
I'm Karen Ice, and it's the day after the draft lottery.
What's going Sportsology?
Kevin Allen, HockeyBuzz.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. It's the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And it was an interesting day yesterday for Toronto and Montreal. But Mike, go ahead. You start.
Yeah, I just want to start with this off the top because it had a lot to do with Detroit and a lot to do with Toronto, and then we can get on to the games and the draft lottery. But the announcement that came out about an hour ago regarding the Calder Trophy nominations, Mort Seider, Michael Bunting from the Leafs, and Trevor Zegras were nominated as the top three for the Calder. And Kev, I heard a lot of hue and cry about, Lucas Raymond wasn't there. Anton Lundell was not nominated. There were like three. This was a good year for rookies.
Yeah.
But I think they got it right pretty much.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was a tough one. It really was. And it's hard to compare those players because they were all on kind of different kinds of teams and were all in different positions. Like Lundell, probably of all the guys, had the toughest luck. Like, I think he had a remarkable season, but he didn't play on the top line like Lucas Raymond or Bunting did, So he didn't really get the points. But you look at his plus minus, what a good defensive player he was. He was in a checking role and performed at a high level. He certainly had a case that, frankly, they all had a case for.
There's 5 really good ones.
Yeah, there really were. So, I know they're going to be upset in Detroit because Lucas Raymond had a remarkable season. But I agree with you. I said before that all the players that we've mentioned, and we didn't even talk about Matthew Boldy.
Right.
If you want to vote for those, I have no problem.
Right. And Corinne, if you talk about like maybe a half season, Cole. I mean, Cole. If you could eliminate the Dominique Ducharme Cole
period,
where he scored 1 goal, and take the Marty St. Louis where he's scored 19 goals, then it was he was in there.
The nominations kind of cracked me up because seconds after the nominations came out, there was loads of people saying, "Oh, Caulfield got robbed by an old man." I was like, "Yeah, are you talking about Bunting or Ducharme?" That made me laugh.
That's a good line.
Okay, honestly, and I'm not going to reveal who I voted for, but my philosophy toward voting for the Calder was influenced by what Kevin said. The rules are, if the guy is 25, he's
I've got no issues with it. I really don't. I just thought it was funny.
That's the rule. If we don't like the rules as writers,
change the rules.
We should go to the league and say this isn't right to have 18-year-olds competing with 25-year-olds. But the rules are the rules, and if the rules say the guy is eligible, then he should be on an equal footing with all the other players. It shouldn't say, the rules don't say, weight it and discount their production if they're older. And that's not what the rules say. So.
This isn't Peter Stastny or Sergei Makarov where they're in their late 20s. 25. I think 25 is reasonable, especially for players who, not Bunting, but because he played in the OHL. But there are players who play 4 years of college and come out at 22, 23 years old. So it's.
Kaprizov was 24, right? So.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see any way this is Insider's award anyway. I mean, DeMar Harris said,
Oh, no, Slider's going to win.
Slider's going to win.
I mean, it's got to be his award. I mean, he's one of the
No
best
dress.
in such a long time.
But I
One
gave
of the best
Bolton seriously
rookies forever.
consideration too. Bolton
Yeah.
had an amazing year.
I mean, it's hard to argue with the full impact of a single player versus most of the guys there. Now, Lindell's a little bit different story because he was a contributor defensively as well. But, Sider, he was the toughest player on the team. He was the strongest player. He led the team in hits. He led it in blocked shots. He runs their power play. He's the first guy in the front of the line when there's trouble. Like, this guy is a full service player.
Right.
And he played like he was their best player, and he was 20 years old. I mean, and he can do it all. Like, I think right now, and I've said this before, and it ticks off Ranger fans, but would you, if I was the Red Wings and I was offered Adam Fox for him, even though Adam Fox is an incredible player, I'm not sure I'd take it.
Well,
just because
I get where you're coming from.
in a salary cap, or Fox deserves. I think he's making 9.5.
Oh, yeah.
But obviously, but if you made that trade, you're getting Sider at $925,000 plus.
Yeah, but
That's
leaving aside the salary,
yeah.
just in terms of, because not very often does a player come along that he's great in all categories. Like,
Right.
Shea Weber was an example of that, where he was tremendous offensively because of that amazing shot. He was a physical force. He was a beast. He just had, and he could play defense. He was good one-on-one. Well, Sider does all that too. I don't recall Shea Weber being a great shot blocker, but I'm sure he blocked a lot of shots.
He wasn't like a major one, but
but Sider is a really good shot blocker. So, so it'll be interesting. I mean, maybe this is, you never know with young players. I mean, maybe this is the best they'll ever be. But I'm telling you, I've seen a lot of good young players, but Sider is pretty incredible.
Yeah. All right, let's get to last night. Let's start with the draft lottery first, so we can. Carrion has to run or anything like that. But yeah, this was the expected. We've seen now a couple times. I don't know what rabbit foot New Jersey has, but it's just an amazing thing that the Devils keep coming up with these special picks. I mean, that's a lot of top draft picks now that they've had, and this is going to be another one. But this is going to be fun, Karen. Montreal, the draft, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, it is going to be fun. Finally, that season of misery was kind of worth it, because at least they get that pick. But it's kind of infuriating, though, to see the Montreal fan base at times, because it took minutes, if not seconds, for people to start to speculate. Oh, good, we can trade the first overall pick for Lafrenière to New York. I'm like, what are you talking about? Please, it's nonsense.
Corinne, I joked with the guys yesterday. It says, you watch, the Habs fan base will want to draft Matthew Savoy because his name sounds French.
No, but I mean, everyone, they've
I
got
thought that
on Lafrenière, and they're like, well, Shane Wright's not even a generational player. No, neither is Lafrenière.
No, but again,
he's a center, and
I want to go back to
this.
this. At the 2003 draft, which we all count as pretty much the greatest draft in the last 20 years, Nathan Horton was the third pick. Patrice Bergeron was the 45th pick, something like that.
Yeah.
Well, how would you view that today?
Like a big mistake.
Braden Point was a third-round pick.
That comment is somewhat silly, Russ, because the draft by nature is always going to be like that.
But my point is, you can't say that Shane Wright's not a generational player because he's got a time to reach his peak. He's a great player already, though. He is.
I don't know too many players that they've missed on in recent years when, with all the scouting, in terms of knowing whether or not they were going to be high yield impact players versus very good players. I mean, what people have said about this draft, which I don't think you can argue with, is that there are no generational players, no players that we can identify that are like Crosby, Matthews, Connor McDavid. So those are generational players. Generational players are players you can identify when they're young, and there's none of those players. But and there may not be superstars, but there may not be. but there might be. There's going to be good, but that's true almost all the time. So I think we do a better job identifying the generational players, and I don't think there are any of those. But that doesn't mean Wright isn't going to be a terrific player.
As an example, did everybody call Matthews a generational player? Not everybody did. No.
Oh, yes, they did.
Some did.
I covered that draft pretty well.
It was split. Not everybody did.
Yeah, well, 94% of the people.
Russ, you know as well as I do that there was artificial drama put out there. Maybe Line A will be. No, Matthews was Matthews had to stand on his head at the World Championships to justify Toronto. He was going to go to Toronto no matter what. He was the clear number one.
Yeah.
And they just wanted to pump up Line A to get that. Now, one thing I is like, because I've heard, and I'm not saying in terms of the similarity of the type of player that he is, but I've heard comparisons of Wright to Nico Hischier. You could do a lot worse than taking Nico Hischier. There are no Alexander Diggs anymore when it comes to first overall picks.
And I'll tell you why.
I heard someone say yesterday about that Nico Hischier, Patrick draft, that was the weakest draft. But there was a generational player right there in Cale Makar. I mean,
wait. How about
generation on every which way? But he wasn't. He was in that draft.
And he was not called generational at the time.
He was not.
After Hischier and Patrick, Heiskanen, Makar, Pedersen.
But that's my point. See, that makes my point.
Yeah,
most of the time, Kevin's right that it is identified right, but you never know. But the thing about Shane Wright that makes him special, he's fast, he's got great offense and everything. It's his leadership and the mental game that he already has figured out. He already knows how to make players better. He already knows how to work with his teammates in practice, in game, to get things to happen on the ice. Not a lot of players can do that. That's why he's better. Sure.
That's exactly what you need for a real build as well. So, in
my
mind, there's no
pretty
question
much everybody is saying that. Like, I don't think anybody's disputing what Russ does.
No.
Yeah. And the other thing I think that needs to be taken into account here is his maturity and his head on his shoulders seems so solid.
It's very solid.
And when you're going into Montreal the Canadiens as the first pick overall in a draft, you're going to need to have that kind of head on your shoulders. Because there's going to be pressure on you all the time. You're going to be viewed in like Doug Wickenheiser was viewed. You're going to be viewed like that.
Unlike the last few years where I think undue pressure was put on Kotkaniemi because he was a third overall pick, or Alex Galchenyuk, who was a third overall pick. I think Wright can handle it, but Corinne, I think the benefit here is you're going to have a 1-2 punch up the middle. We talked about this yesterday. A 1-2 punch up the middle with players that play a similar type of game, because Suzuki is good defensively and offensively. I think he might be better offensively than Wright, but Wright's pretty good. So that's nice to have that 1-2 combo up the middle.
It sure is. And as for the pressure factor, I think it's going to be not as bad as it would have been if the Habs were expected to win or contend right now. The timing to get to Montreal is quite good. Expectations are not through the roof, and that is great for him. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if they'll pick him and they'll decide to keep him up for the whole season, or if they'll send him back to the OHL like they, did with Suzuki. But I think the timing's good.
I think they'll probably keep him there. But the only thing I was going to say is with Wright, the best thing he told me at the time that I spoke to him was the time where everybody was like, oh, look at Connor Bedard. He's so much better than Shane Wright. And I basically brought that up to Wright. I said, listen, people talk about your lack of highlight reel goals. What do you have to say about that? And he's basically like, listen, I don't care about that stuff.
Why would he? I mean, a highlight, real goal is still only worth one goal, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. So, but we all get enamored. Like, we see what Bedard has, and it's easy to say, wow, that's unbelievable. But it almost seems like a player like Wright is less appreciated until you actually see the little things he does on the ice.
Well, Corinne, what I wonder here is, because, we don't know everything about what the plan for Jeff Gordon and Kent Hughes have for this team. But pretty much, I think what we have heard is a rebuild, not a tear down completely, but guys like Gallagher, guys like Mike Hoffman, guys like Petrie, Josh Anderson, possibly, maybe even Carey Price being traded over the next year or so. Does getting Shane Wright change the direction where it's sort of a reset And,
No, I don't think it does. We've seen what doing a reset does, which is not a whole lot. And I think this new management team is ready to do it and do it the right way.
Okay.
Bergevin tried to build from the net out, and that failed. We've all seen that. I think now they're going to try and win the middle. You win the middle, you win the game, and then you win a cup. That's the goal.
Now, there was something low-key funny, Corinne. You probably caught it. Ken Hughes' son, Jack, is in this draft. He's a center. And he kind of tweeted, I think, saying, "Hey, Dad, how come you're not going to take me first?" Something like that. I thought that was great because Jack Hughes still might be a first-rounder. He might be towards the end of the first round.
And
that's fun.
You never know. They've got Calgary's pick. So.
And another Jack Hughes. And
another Jack Hughes, but Ken Hughes' son.
I did listen this morning to some video that one of my readers, some audio that one of my readers sent me about Hughes talking about that he's not going to say that Wright is their guy. Do you think that's just him saying what you're supposed to say, or do you really think he's considering not taking him?
I mean, Russ would know more.
I'll let Corinne answer that.
Yeah, that's who that's directed at.
I think that's pretty much what he's supposed to say. I mean, knowing that he's going to pick first now, he knows that he can take this guy. The week before, he did say, "Oh, we're excited to go to Helsinki. We've got a few good Europeans to watch and all that." But right now, I think his mind is pretty much made that it's going to be Shane Wright. And funny enough, it's going to be. Have you seen Jonathan Drouin next to Shane Wright? It's like Wright looks like an odd-looking Drouin.
Yeah.
How freaky is that? Funny.
Yeah.
Edmonton held off announcing McDavid until the draft, and I'm basically, if I was at the draft lottery and I was the GM of Edmonton, I would have said, "Mike McDavid's my pick." I mean, come on.
Well,
we have to talk for a second about.
But just one more comment about that, just on this subject. Right after the draft was over, of course, I saw a lot of people tweeting about what Mackenzie had written, where a flash poll of his people that he talks to every year for his draft predictions had gone only 6 out of 9 votes for Wright as number 1 now, which he had sort of predicted in his midseason evaluations because, everybody said, I'm voting for Wright, but I really like the other players that are starting to climb. And Cooley is crimed, and also the Slovak, Slavkovsky, as well. So, but first of all, I can't see taking Slavkovsky simply because the value of a center. Like you want a center, especially in Montreal.
He's not a complete player, Slavkovsky. He's a great player, but there's both those things.
I think he's more polished than Cooley. So.
Well, the funny thing is, it might New Jersey's got the second pick. Sveshkovsky might be the better fit for New Jersey simply because they have Hughes and they have Hischier.
We could put Hischier on the wing someday.
Yeah, I think Hischier's better on the wing.
He is better on the wing.
Yeah.
Trust me, Shane Wright is a real center. There's very few real centers in this draft, and Wright and Cooley are 2 of them.
Right.
Yeah. The one thing I wanted to talk about for a second, because it's a little different, but I just want to talk about the GMs, and their stills, like when they watching the draft lottery, when they go to each GM from one to another, it was just found it hilarious. Like each one of them, I wish I'd taken pictures because it was pictures of each one of them because it's just. I mean, first of all, not a smile among them at all. Not even
but did you see Kent Hughes? He looked like he was about to chew his nails. He looked like a ball of nerves.
It's a lottery you don't want to be in. Worse.
Yeah, well, that's not really why that's there. But I was surprised. I asked this morning, and some of them didn't know they were already on the air. Because there was a delay, like Steve Yzerman of the Red Wings, for example, was talking to someone off, and there were several of them who were carrying on conversations or looking at papers, and they simply didn't know that they were already.
I'm convinced Lou was a hologram because he never moved.
Yeah, not a hair was out of place.
Did anyone else catch that Dorian was asleep? Like I saw that when they went to him, he was nodding off like this, and then he was like but yeah, Lou.
Yeah, he did. That a hologram is the perfect description of Lou. In that.
Well, either that or Weekend at Bernie's.
It's a wax.
Yeah.
That is how I always picture Lou Lamoriello in my head. That's what kind of freaked me out. Like I picture him in a dark room like that, just with stark lighting, just
Petting
looking
a
straight
cat.
at you like that.
And
Yeah.
petting a
That's how
cat
you
like-
picture Lou Lamoriello in your head.
like
And
Don
and you know,
Corleone in
Lou doesn't do
Godfather.
anything by mistake. Like there's no accidents. He wants to put that image out there too. Like I guarantee you that they took some time to make him look exactly like that. Like
I think
wants
Dorian
that-
was one of the ones that had no idea that he was.
No, Dorian had no idea because
Yeah.
he looked down
literally
and then he looked up surprised.
Yeah,
He was
like
like,
he didn't
I
know
was
that they
close.
had already were on. I mean, they knew they were coming to them. They just didn't know it was right then. So
they should be able to tell them. They should have some kind of thing. Okay, just for the next 4 minutes, smile. Like you're going to come on at some point, you know, like in that. But it's like just like
well.
and, you know,
Here's the other thing too. I don't know how everyone's felt about it, but I thought it was a bit insulting that the Vegas Kelly
Yeah.
McCrimmon didn't even bother to show up. Just
I
sent
mean,
a,
absolutely.
you know,
Not just insulting, but perhaps telling Kevin. Like, you know, like I thought like
No,
his
what do you
job
mean
is
tell-
in
what do you mean-
jeopardy.
Wait. What do you mean telling? Telling it
His
how?
job is I don't think his
No,
job is
he's been
staying
Garrett.
solid.
Foley said
He's been
he's coming
guaranteed.
back.
yeah. Foley and him sat together and mapped
Right.
out the Jack Eichel. I don't think
Yeah.
Foley can fire him when he was part of it.
Yeah.
Foley
No, I don't
is
think he's not Jack
Foley
Eichel
is
either.
Geppetto and Kelly McCrimmon's Pinocchio.
I will tell you this though. I'm pretty certain, especially when he muted himself, that Derek Englund was basically yelling to McCrimmon, "It was only the 16th pick anyhow. Who cares?"
And we're probably trading
He
it.
did say something, and
No,
I'm sure
it's
that's
Oh, it's gone. Yeah, they don't have it. Yeah.
no.
But still,
That's what I mean.
McCrimmon not showing up.
When they
is-
said it was the 16th selection, he was probably like, "Who cares? It's the 16th selection."
Don't think for a second that there's other GMs who none of them want to be there. Like it's not the
No,
they don't want to.
We know that.
Don't think for a second that the perception already of Vegas having this like holier than like Vegas is all awesome all the time type thing. That didn't play into the other GMs when they were sitting there. Like
Nobody's
that,
saying
the fact
that
that McCrimmon
anymore.
needs up.
Nobody's saying that anymore.
No.
People, no, they are. I mean, I've talked to teams, I've talked to owners that just can't stand the Vegas Golden Knights, the way they do
Yeah.
things. And
Yeah, and they what they don't like too is Vegas showed up and then suddenly became the number one revenue producer in the league.
Oh,
like
yeah.
it just
Yeah.
bugs people. That just totally
you've
bugs
seen
people.
it, right, Kevin? You've heard there's
Oh yeah, I've heard that there's a lot of
there's
people
vitriol out there.
that and they want to do things the way they want to do them. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
have to
know.
ask Kev, Detroit has zero luck in the lottery.
no, I know. Yeah.
Zero.
Well,
And
I think,
Philadelphia.
if I'm not mistaken, I think Steve Yzerman, and well, the Red Wings in general, like they're like -8 in terms of number of places they've lost.
Crazy.
I think they lead all franchises in
I-
that.
But Kev, I have no sympathy for them because Yzerman does so well. Raymond,
Oh,
Sider, Kosa.
Well,
we don't need the first.
yeah. Yeah, that was my lead. That essentially, he's got all this ability, but what he doesn't have is luck. He just doesn't have any luck with regard to the draft lottery.
And I felt like Yarmo cleaned up. Yarmo did what Buffalo was hoping to do, and he did it for Seth Jones. And you know what? Yarmo cleaned up with the 6 and 12.
Yeah.
Really good.
Yeah.
I do think, with regard to New Jersey, though, because there was so much, even on the Detroit websites, there was discussion about the Devils, and the craziness of all that is like, yeah, the league office is sitting around saying we want to send all of our top young talent to New Jersey. That's our plan. We want that's where we want to make sure we get our top players. We want to get them to
same
Jersey.
thing.
The only thing less plausible is yes, we want to send all of our young talent to Arizona.
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, I know everybody wants to.
walking around the Short Hills Mall today.
So,
Like in northern Jersey as they get ready for. No, you're right. I mean, you're absolutely right, Kevin. I think the same thing every time. I'm like, oh man, it's like it's very funny. So before we get in, as we get into the games from last night, which I want to throw something at you because I had this epiphany last night about this playoff series and why we're seeing these blowouts and why we're seeing these weird back and forth things. And I think there's something to it. And I know it's probably not like the most incredible thing ever, but I decided that there are two different kinds of teams in the playoffs. Okay. There are consistent teams that play systems, and there are teams that can overpower teams. And these are they're two very distinctive different, like there's powerful, like, so, and the perfect example, and when you can put that together, you get kind of Tampa, like you get Tampa, like a consistent team that has overpowering players on it, but they play a consistent system. That's why they're Stanley Cup champions twice over, right? They can do both. But in most cases, you see one or the other. And I'm going to, and the Toronto Tampa series, along with the Minnesota St. Louis series, are sort of following, and even Edmonton, LA to a degree, are following this pattern perfectly. That, there's no question in my mind that at times Toronto can overpower Tampa, and at times Minnesota can overpower St. Louis, and at times Edmonton overpowers LA.
Well,
like they just keep the puck in the zone. It looks like a power play, and there's nothing the other teams can do about it. Let me just finish this thought, Mike. For about 10 minutes every game, this overpowering occurs, and if the goalie, it's not 10 straight minutes, but it's like within the game, 10 to 15 minutes of the game is just these overpowering teams taking it to the consistency teams. And if the consistent teams don't have good goaltending or something like that, then it's all over, right? Then the overpowering team can win. Otherwise, the consistency, which just is, not too high, not too low throughout the game, tends to be taking it. I think every one of these series, what's different about this year versus other years.
I thought you were done. Jeez.
I'm not done. I will tell you when I'm done.
Okay.
What's different this year versus, I will come to a definitive end, I promise. I'll do end scene. So what is different this year than most years is we don't have consistent team versus consistent team, except for perhaps Calgary, Dallas. But I was trying to, which is notably probably the most boring series to watch, because when you get these other consistent versus powerful teams, you have this end scene. Mike, go ahead. That's my theory.
Okay, of the three series that you mentioned, St. Louis, Minnesota, and Toronto, Tampa are sort of those types of matchups, where I think you've got 2 versus 3, 2 really good teams both had great years. Edmonton, LA, baloney. I'm sorry. You've got a team. LA is playing without Doughty. They're getting fantastic goaltending from Quick. Deneau and Kopitar at times are shutting down McDavid and Draisaitl, but it's not possible to shut them down for 60 minutes every game. And again, Edmonton is flawed and is losing that series because I think their goaltending compared to what LA is getting is substandard. Smith has had good games, he's had good stretches, but I think in the end, the reason that they're down 3-2 is because of that. And Kev, I was listening to that game on my way back from Toronto yesterday, and the Kings had a 3-1 lead going into the third. They had Edmonton where they wanted them, and then of course McDavid and Draisaitl just go bonkers, and it's 4-4 to overtime, and then Kempe scores in overtime. LA shouldn't be leading this series based on the talent level that Edmonton has, but they are.
You know what? Yeah. Adrian Kempe is a great player for one reason. He knew Mike Smith is in net. I've got a chance to get to the net. Right. And give my best shot here.
Did you hear what he said, Russ?
It was great.
Did you hear what he said, which was even better than that? He's like, I'm coming out for my second shift, and I saw that McDavid and Draisaitl were still out there, and they were the first shift. So I knew that I had them. They were going to be tired. I took the puck. I just went full speed because he's like, and that is some pretty good thinking.
That was very good thinking.
Kevin, I was listening to the third period, and the LA Kings announcers said McDavid and Draisaitl, I think, for 15 or 16 of the 20 minutes in the third period because they had to catch up. Again, it's a 2-man team, and they can't do it all on their own.
I would dispute a little bit of what you said. I watched that game, and Draisaitl and Connor McDavid were terrific and pulling them back. But in the end, it was their goaltending. Like on Kempe's drive to the net, and for those who didn't see it, essentially you've all seen the type of goal before. He's coming in wide and then cuts across the crease. So he's going across. And, Smith's got to make that save. You pay the goalies to make that save, the big save, the important save. He couldn't make it.
What's coming on that play.
He couldn't make it, and they lost that. But I think the Kings, you haven't given them enough credit. They've played well in this. And I do agree with Eklund in terms of I've watched a lot of games, and it's all been ebbs and flows. But I think that's oftentimes what it is in the postseason. But then you start to see the advantage of the teams as the series wears on sort of take hold. And there's less advantage this year between the teams, I think. So no one team has been able to kind of, grab charge of it. But, like that's the way that
Kevin. But my thinking is like, this is why, and I normally feel that way exactly. But my thinking is usually when I watch a series, you can say that team is in 7 games, that team's going to win. They're just better than the other. You get the sense that they're better.
Yeah.
But then in this playoffs, there are moments when these teams that are not going to win are way better than the team that they're losing to. Like these, just like moments when it's just overwhelmed. Like you don't usually see teams that are losing in these series overwhelm the team that they beat, but at all.
Well, maybe, but I think we do see these, in series. We see that. I mean, like somebody pointed out for which I thought was kind of funny. Somebody pointed out on Twitter for the fact that the Lightning is 15-0 after they've lost a game in playoffs means they've lost a lot of games in the playoffs. And there's a truth to that. Go ahead.
Yeah, there is.
But I mean, bottom line is Edmonton is a flawed team. It's not even a team; it's a 2-man team. They don't have everything. They're a cautionary tale. If you put all your eggs in the same baskets, you're not gonna win. They only invested in attack and thought, we can make do with that. Well, you can't. You need goaltending, you need defending, and they're not even going to have defending now that Nurse is going to get a suspension.
Yeah, well, I mean,
they don't have a goal.
I think he's going to get suspended because
he should.
He was doing an SD special delivery Jones headbutt on.
It looked like he was trying to clear a corner in football. Well, soccer. Sorry.
Right. To me, the great thing about that was Edmonton is flawed. I agree, but they also have 2 goalies that have never left their goal line. Both those goalies, Costin and Smith, play so far back in the net. It's uncomfortable to watch Smith in the game. Like when you watch him because he's so far back in his net, you feel like at any moment someone could throw the puck from the other end of the rink.
This is why they shouldn't have him anymore.
I don't blame Mike Smith in the sense that Mike Smith has been put in an untenable position because he's not a starting goalie anymore. This is on Ken Holland. They may come back and win this series. They have 2 of the 3 or 4 best forwards in the league. They have some decent players like Kane and Nugent Hopkins and Hyman. They could very well score 7 goals like they did in games 2 and 3 and run roughshod over the Kings. They shouldn't be losing in this series. And the reason that they're losing is because they don't have the goaltending. And the reason they don't have the goaltending is the GM didn't go out and trade for the goaltending or sign the goaltending.
They shouldn't be losing, and they should have done the goaltending. But if I was to predict now them versus Calgary or them versus Dallas in the next round,
they're going to lose.
I don't know that I'm not going to go with LA again. I
thought you meant Edmonton.
No, if I was to pick LA, and LA is playing that well. They really are. Yes. They are. Mike Quick is that strong right now. Kempe is like the Jeff Carter of this team. Like if you go back to the LA Kings that won Stanley Cups, he's their Jeff Carter. They
have 2 of the best defensive forwards in the NHL. And last night when Woodcroft put out Draisaitl and McDavid on the same line, positions didn't matter. They put out Kopitar and Danault head-to-head against them because that's the way they neutralize those guys.
Yeah.
And Danault was actually the most used forwards by the Kings yesterday. And we say that he's good defensively, but he's also got over 6 minutes of power play time yesterday.
He's essentially Mike Richards. Like, when you think about the Kings teams that won the Stanley Cup, Danault is Mike Richards, Kempe is Jeff Carter, right? And then you put and that's really, Richards killed all the penalties. He was defensive. He took all the faceoffs. They have these things that they plugged in, and it's great. And then if Quick does what Quick does, I mean that's the thing. I mean, it all comes down to goaltending, right? And
well, I think back in USA Today, we always talked about the nut graph, which is what the story really is. And we usually tucked our nut graph was usually our second paragraph, not the lead. And the nut graph is what Mike said. This is Ken Holland's mess. Because the goaltending is an issue. I would disagree wholeheartedly that they're a 2-man team. Connor McDavid and Draisaitl are great, but they've made some progress in other areas.
I mean, Nurse also got hurt in that game, right?
Yeah, and the Oilers down the stretch were very good, and I think the team sort of kind of pulled together. But in this game, they've had too many times where the Kings have figured out how to shut down the big guys for a short period of time, and then their goaltending has failed them. Not every game, but in key times. So and the Kings are playing well. We never want to give credit to what the other team is doing, but some of what's happening to the Oilers are what the Kings are doing to them. So
they really match up well against the Oilers, and that's the thing too. The Oilers play right into the Kings' strengths, and that's really what you're seeing. It's a fascinating series. I don't know that it's over yet. I still think Edmonton.
No.
In this case, LA is the consistent team, and Edmonton is the power team, right? Edmonton has the ability. We saw they can overpower the Kings when they play that way. I mean, they dominated the one game 8-4. They can do that, and they can do that again.
Now, right now, Boston, Carolina looks like one of those series where every home team is going to win, because the way Boston plays at TD Garden and the way Carolina plays at PNC Arena are two completely different things. I mean, I watched a lot of that game early on before the Leafs game started, and Carolina was just swamping them. And I don't feel encouraged about Boston winning that series. They may stretch it to 7, but Carolina is clearly the better of the two teams, Kev.
Yeah, they have more talent for sure, and that's the key. And that's why they're going to win, and they're just trying to hang on, I think, until they get their goalie back.
Right.
And but I agree with you. I thought Carolina in that game. That's the first game where I looked at it, and they just really looked like Boston had no opportunity.
No answer.
Yeah.
So,
they looked overmatched. They did.
Yeah, they did for sure.
Now, Ak, did you? The only series I didn't see was St. Louis, Minnesota, because that was going on.
I watched that whole game. I had both games on at the same time. But I watched a lot of that game, and there were moments and first of all, we have to talk about Kaprizov for a second. I know we were texting back and forth, in our thing, but I am now officially all in on. I mean, I've always
you're a fanboy now of.
I'm a bigger than fanboy. I'm watching what he can do and how he does it and the way he plays all over the ice. Is he the best Russian in the NHL right now?
Second best. We'll say
second best. Yeah.
You think Kucherov's still better? I mean, does he have the potential to pass Kucherov?
Yeah, he might.
Yeah, I don't. Well, first of all, I don't think. I guess, are you putting Ovechkin in a class by himself, because you're not going to remove Ovechkin from being the best?
Okay, yeah. So right. Okay,
he's still getting. He's 100 years old, and he's still getting 50 goals.
He's in a class by himself. Yeah.
The funny thing is,
let's say this: the best all-around Russian hockey player.
I was going to say, because the funny thing was, he wasn't even the best Russian in the game yesterday, because Tarasenko scored a hat trick. But
but I mean, the best all-around for what he can do all over the ice. Also, perhaps the best skating Russian since Pavel Bure. Just his skates, his edge control is just
crazy,
ridiculous. Some of the things you see him do, he can accelerate going sideways. He has this move where he skates. Have you seen him do this? He cuts and he's going sideways and he's accelerating foot over foot like this. It's just nuts. He's just an inspiration to watch. One of
the things he did on the power play was he had the puck, it was stolen, and he went and he stole it back and got the goal. You don't see that from a lot of high skill players.
And there are so many times when there was 4 or 5 guys in the corner getting the puck, and he's just coming out with it. He's skating. He's not just tapping the puck to someone else along the boards. He's literally bringing the puck out of a group of 4 people. The goal, the second goal he scores, the first goal was just a laser. And that happened just as something was happening in the Toronto game, but it was ridiculous. And then the second goal he scored, which was a bad pass, basically from the corner from, I guess it was Fiala.
Yeah, he had to settle it down.
It was passed to between his legs really low. So it's he is taking it and almost what's the thing that game we play, croquet, I guess is almost in a croquet spot, but he puts it short side with no space at all, up high
Up
from
high over
between his
his
legs,
shoulder, yeah.
straight up. Like it just like, and just everything he did that whole period, I was just mesmerized. Like, like that thing, he couldn't wait for his next shift. And they roll 4 lines, so it's not all, he's not out there as much as you would want him to be.
But
But
this
they-
is a series of adjustments, and St. Louis adjusted correctly. They wrestled that game away from Minnesota.
Yeah, and there was a point, and this was like what kind of my epiphany of this power versus consistency thing. There was a point in that second period, right after Minnesota had a 2-1 lead, where Foligno, who had 9 hits in the game, or something, Foligno, who was just killing guys. They just were running they were running over St. Louis. Like St. Louis didn't look like they should be in the same game. Like they were, but the delicacy of all the stuff, they give up the 1 goal, and they give up a goal to Brendan Saad, who has tormented the Wild since way back into the Chicago Blackhawks days, like in the playoffs. Like Brendan Saad is one of their nemesises. So him scoring that goal was also through a lot of that arena got quiet, partially because it was tied, but partially because Brendan Saad tied it too, because it was that was something. Oh man! And for whatever reason, they stopped skating, they stopped hitting, and in the third period, they never got it back. But there were moments in that game. They looked so good and crazy good.
Well, the one thing I heard this morning, Kevin, it's funny because Fleury has been in there, and now there might be some consideration of going toward Cam Talbot for Game 6, and that would seem to be a bit of a departure because you got a goaltender who hasn't played the entire series, and now you're going to insert him in a situation where you're facing elimination. I know they trust him because he's been there all year, but I mean, do you think that would be a wise move for Minnesota to go to Talbot?
Well, I mean, I think it's a predictable move. When things aren't going well, I mean, that's sort of an NHL tradition to change the goalie, to change things up and give some maybe a spark and get players, no matter how you feel about the goaltending, to say, well, we got to get our act together. But I think that one of the stories, and this was brought up to me by a former NHL team executive who I talked to this morning, who was kind of talking about, he goes, man, I can't believe they're not making more. And his point is a really valid one. The injuries that St. Louis has suffered on defense, it still is leading this series. He said, let me call any general manager and say, I'm going to take 4 defensemen out of your defense, and then you bring up guys to fill those holes and then try to compete in a playoff series.
I'll tell you something. Yeah. I'll tell you something right now. Joe Sakic and Jared Bednar are praying that St. Louis wins that series because Minnesota, with the bunch of nut cutters that they have and tough players like Greenway and Foligno, will make it tough on the Avalanche. But if they're playing,
you should watch what you wish for, though, in a situation like
that.
No,
I'm not saying that they're going to come out and say that, but I'm just saying.
No, but I'm saying
if the Blues defense is as depleted as Kevin is talking about, it's still going to be tough, but I'm saying, that's an easier mark to.
They are depleted, but here's the perfect example of something that is never brought up, and that is defense is a 5-player game.
Well, for sure, but
their forwards back check as well as any.
Well, I would dispute that.
Right,
they're pretty good, but there's some really good back checking.
When one of your 5 for St. Louis is a career AHLer like Kali Rosen, that's tough.
Or Tarasenko,
Tarasenko doesn't, but I mean, they have a lot.
They were able to activate Perunovich, and he did look really good. He's got good speed.
Well, he does, but just for folks who haven't been paying attention, Krug's been out, Letty's been out, Scandella's been out, Bortuzzo's been out. These are guys that were logging big minutes, and they've had to slot people in, guys who they're not accustomed to doing that, and they have played well despite that. It just seems like, you hear it, and it is the cliche, the next man up. Of course it's next man up. What are you going to do? Play without a guy?
Yeah, right. They're doing a good job of protecting the defense. They're young, though. They are protecting.
Last night they played 7 defensemen, and obviously a lot of these guys are playing less, well less than 100%. Letty played 18 minutes, Bortuzzo 10. Perunovich 11. The guys that are logging the big minutes, Parayko is over 25 minutes, and so is Justin Falk. I mean, they're dead.
I got to mention Falk. We were kind of ripping him a couple of years ago on his defense, he's recovered nicely.
Yeah, he's been playing. But I mean, I think the point is a really valid one. It's to lose that many defensemen and still play as well as they have in this series. And I don't think this series is over either. But
no, I don't either.
But it's pretty impressive what the Blues have done, and some of it is I think the knowledge of how to win. I mean, they're not far removed from having won it all. They do understand what it takes, and I do think that the defense. I think Berube is pretty demanding of it. So Eck is right in terms of I think they are a 5-man defensive front, but I wouldn't list them among the best in the league at it. But they're pretty darn good.
No,
they rallied. They're playing above their level right now as far as that goes. I think like they just watching like guys like Thomas and some of these younger players come back hard. Like they're really coming back hard in the Wild. Now the Wild, they aren't usually offensively skilled beyond their top guys, but that also helps them out here. Colorado has a lot more offensive skill than the Wild have. But
so I was up in Toronto for Game 5, and that series has been consistent up until this game last night, because whenever a team got a lead, the other team essentially, and I'm not saying, they just dropped their sticks and said, we quit, but they capitulated. The other teams, once they got a lead, once they, other than Game 3, when Tampa came back in the third period, if you got the opening goal, you were pretty much done. And yesterday, Tampa gets the first 2 goals in the first period, and I'll tell you, after the first intermission, everybody in the press box are like looking at themselves and saying, what the hell is going on with this team? This is the key. This is the biggest game of the year, and the Leafs did not show up. On the power play, they're overpassing the puck. And apparently during the first intermission, like Jason Spezza, talked to the team, told them to, chill out, relax. We have a lot of talent. You just got to do your job and whatever.
Yeah.
They did. They came out. They got a goal in the second. They tied the game. They took the lead. McDonough scored a goal to make it 3-3, and then Matthews and Marner combined for the winner. Sheldon Keefe said it after the game. That game is great, but that game is meaningless unless they finish the job. And that,
the hope is they're gonna. The biggest thing you were crying for was more Nylander, more Tavares. You got that.
Yes, finally, yeah. and they won because of it.
I have a funny story to tell. So I can't, and it just speaks to me being 100 years old, but I can't walk, chew gum, and text while I'm watching the game. I like to watch the game. And these guys, gentlemen, they're with me, have a string. I just don't pay much attention to it just because I'm watching the game.
Right.
Well, I'm watching the other game, and through exit polling, much like CNN, Mike called it. He called it, it's over. Mike, you've seen his sign, it's over. He basically said that the Leafs were done. It's over. It's over. Now, I didn't see that till later on, so I was looking at that and going, wow, wonder what the hell happened in the Leafs. So I turned back to the Leafs, and the Leafs are just mounting this massive charge in the top players they're playing. And I'm just laughing to myself. Did you hold the sign up, though? Just like you do?
I did not.
Because he did. Mike Agello called the series over. What were they down at the time? Because I didn't, you didn't give a score. Just 2-0. So at Game 5 with a 2-0 lead
in the first period,
Tampa Bay, with the Tampa Bay Lightning, in my opinion, looking very that's right, looking very ordinary in this series, if I can use that word. He called it. It was over, but of course I didn't know that because I wasn't paying attention.
I got to tell you, Eck and I were trying to pull him back in from the edge. We were like, this game's not over.
But I was not okay. I was not alone. I mean, I'm not going to name the people, but I'm in the first intermission. Everybody's like scratching their head, like, what is wrong with this team?
Well, you must run from the disease that is the Toronto media, Mike. You cannot. You can't be steered into despair. This is not. This is just a hockey game.
You're hanging with the wrong reporters, because nobody that I hung around with when I was, covering the league would have called a game 2-0.
Right. I'm a fatalist, Kev. Like you did.
Well, you are a fatalist, but I can't believe that now that I hear the story.
Question though. So now that Tampa can't win in 6,
Mhm.
do you see a path for the Leafs winning?
No, I think they're going to lose in 7.
Yeah. Well, I don't. Not to this. I did want to talk a little about Tampa. I just don't think they've played well. Now, I didn't see last night. I didn't see a lot of last night's game. I did start watching it at the end when Toronto was taking over. But I watched that series, and I've seen what I saw all last season, but I didn't trust myself enough to pick against them. But they have not been the same team, not even close.
In fits and starts.
I haven't even seen that. Even when they're at their best, I thought they're still not. And the other thing is look, I love Vasilevsky, and I would take him over thing, but he has just been ordinary at best. I thought he was ordinary at best all season, or not all season, but in the second half of the season.
Well, we talked about his workload.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say, Kev. Because last night, normally with Vasilevsky at his top, they get up 2-0. It's over with.
Yeah,
it really is, because he's that good and he's that. But he isn't the same this year. So.
I brought up the same guy that I talked to when we were talking about the Blues. I was asking about the Tampa Bay, and I said, yeah, and I know that we've been talking about on my podcast that about his workload. And he goes, well, he hadn't played that many games left. hadn't played that many games when he started playing this poorly. So he said, at the start of January, when he looked, not the same guy, he hadn't played that many games yet,
Right.
So maybe that's true, he said, but, he was playing, in his mind, just average goalie before, he got to the point where he had played too many games. But they really did.
Hedman covered up a lot of mistakes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I think this is Toronto's, and I really love how, Matthews is playing. And, Tom Laidlaw pointed out he remembers it distinctly. And when he says it, I do remember too, that Eklund said at one point, which he was laughed off the stage, that he thought Austin Matthews might be better than Connor McDavid. And this year, as great as Connor McDavid has been, I think Eklund may be right. Just his ability to grab it and really do it. And
you might be right. We'll give him
the way he played yesterday, when he starts hitting a little bit.
Yeah,
a little bit. Then he's another level altogether. I mean, he was really throwing his body down.
McDavid can't impose his physical will on a game. He's an incredible talent.
Right.
The speed, everything. Austin Matthews, just this year, in the first 3 or 4 years of his career, he was sort of on the periphery. He didn't. Now he's a big body kid. He's 6'4", over 200 pounds. He's fast as anything. He generates a lot of speed. And last night he hits Sergachev along the wall and knocks him down. And that
was a real Eric Lindros type moment because he could when he puts Sergachev through the wall, and Sergachev is lying and doesn't even he's lying in pain. And Matthews doesn't even take a slight look back at him, just continues skating slowly with his mouth guard hanging out of his mouth to the bench. Like he just leveled
again. Not a Matthews that we've seen actually. That's like the last sort of 3 or 4 months. He is. I mean, that's a guy who's been tested in the crucible of the Stanley Cup playoffs and knows what he has to do to win. And last night he did it. Now, the question of consistency here. If the Leafs put forth the effort like they did in the final 2 periods of Game 5 and in Game 1 and Game 3, then they'll win the series. But they came up really small in Game 4. And if that team shows up, then it's going 7, and then it's anybody's guess.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have to be lucky too. But one final point about McDavid and Matthews, even though I think Matthews has had just an incredible season, maybe the best season, and I think Eklund may be right. I mean, Matthews has developed in ways better than a lot of us anticipated even, and we all thought he was going to be great. Boy, but if you were actually given the opportunity and you were going to take over the Seattle Kraken and they said you can have either Connor McDavid or Austin Matthews, I think it would be hard to say no to Connor McDavid. Yeah. Just the skill level is still so incredible with him that it's, like their goal last night. I don't know if anybody watches ESPN anymore, but I happened to have it on almost accidentally, and they had the plays of the day, and that backhand goal he scored. I mean, oh my gosh!
Yeah.
I did want to point out a
on that
great
is
low-key play in that game. Mike helped me identify who it was, but when McDonough was sort of waking up in the third period, Michael Bunting picked him on the wall to spring Matthews. If he doesn't do that, McDonough's going to catch Matthews because he saw where Matthews was going, and he had already caught up on a few plays because he was all of a sudden having a great period. That was a great play by Bunting.
That line has been so much more effective during the regular season when Bunting was put on that line. He's a perfect complement to Matthews and Marner. He he's not the biggest guy, but he goes in the corners. He stirs things up, better than Kerfoot, better than even Nylander on that line. Bunting, and they put Bunting back on that line after they tried Kerfoot in Game 4. So I mean, it paid off. Let me just say this, Zach, because of the three games tonight.
Yeah.
I'm more anxious to watch the series that's 3-1 than the ones that are 2-2. I mean, there's
a lot of storylines. The Penguins Rangers game has a ton of storylines to it, right? And it's completely up. The one thing I had to finish before we finish off, before we mention the next night, Draisaitl's first goal last night was unassisted. Did anyone else understand why the hell it was unassisted? McDavid took the puck, streamed down the wing, made an incredible pass into the front, where I think it was somebody in front, the defense for the Oilers, taps the puck back, and Draisaitl scores. We've seen assists given for players that were like barely in the zone.
Well, they've already been on the bench and they've gotten assists.
Yeah, this was like, it's the most baffling thing I've ever seen. Like, he had a great game point wise, but he should have another assist. There is no reason. I wish if I had time, I would.
Did they change it afterward? Or?
They didn't. I just looked at it right now to see.
Yeah.
It's still a storyline with the Ranger game.
Yeah,
Gallant had the guys doing gassers in practice.
Yeah,
which I think is a massive mistake. If Gerard Gallant doesn't understand that he has some skill guys that are never going to go to the net, then he needs to only coach teams like the Vegas Golden Knights from now on, because some guys will go to the net. The other ones, you're going to have to live with some perimeter guys on your team. And if he thinks they're going to do any better because he's going to wear them out the day before an elimination game, doesn't seem smart.
Well, they've already, some of the Ranger fans have turned on Gallant already.
They definitely are.
Just in the way this has gone. And, like, it doesn't have to be a character flaw if you fail in your first, big test as a goalie. Like Shesterkin, and the blame on him, it doesn't mean that you can't win in the postseason. It just means you had a bad game, bad game, and then followed by a game that could have been better. He was so incredible during the season, and we get too carried away. We want to label players, and sometimes a bad game is just a bad game.
Yep.
Oh yeah,
he should start.
Exactly. No, totally, absolutely, 100%. Go ahead.
Two quick things, unless you have more on the game, Zach.
No, I'm good.
So Kev, Patrick Marleau retired a couple days ago. Came out with an article in the Players Tribune. We looked up his, whenever somebody, great or near great retires, we go and ask whether he's a Hall of Famer. I would think with 566 goals, a long a game streak, a couple gold medals, that he's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I think you'll get in. Although he doesn't pass the name recognition thing. Right. Like you say, Patrick Marleau, you don't think Hall of Famer, but he does have the credentials, for it, and the international, I think, is really going to carry him as well. So.
The other thing was Elliot Friedman mentioned yesterday as a possibility for the New York Islanders, the name of Joel Quenneville. And I immediately, Elliot knows more than I remember in terms, and his connections are impeccable. I just wonder what the reaction in the league would be with the situation with all these, Stan Bowman and everything else. Whether there isn't an official suspension, but it's sort of like, I mean,
yeah, I think it's an unofficial one. I think the way it was left is you have to check back with me if you're going to try to come back in the league. So
that way we're letting you resign, but
like if you want to go quietly tonight, we won't have to deal with it. But if you want to come back and coach, then we are going to have to deal with it.
Right. And I don't think Quenneville's going to want to deal with it.
And I think Elliot Friedman, and reading that seemed more like speculation than.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, the way it was written was, I wouldn't be surprised, or don't count out to Lou making a call, and
knowing how he writes and knowing how he drops things, he only drops things if he's been told by somebody. He can't confirm it, but he drops things that he's been told by somebody that's possible.
Doesn't this feel like
it didn't seem like one of those things like I know for sure.
No.
Yeah.
And he's not being told by Lou. So if he's being told by someone,
Lou doesn't tell anybody anything.
No,
but if he's being told,
he's a hologram. Russ nailed it. He's a hologram.
If he's being told by anybody, I would guess if Quenneville's group wouldn't mind having Quenneville's name out there. Maybe.
If we title the show, the show title would be Lou is a hologram.
Yeah, I love that. By the way, I'm going to do that. I actually really, really like Lou Lamoriello. Just for he's a really good guy.
I'm going to show you McDavid's non-assist. Okay, McDavid is the one who streaks down the ice with the puck. Obviously, okay. So this is the non-assist on Draisaitl's shorthanded.
Obviously, Mac has McDavid in a hockey.
No, this is McDavid with the puck right now. That's McDavid. Okay, goes in front. Draisaitl scores. That's an unassisted goal.
Yeah, it can't be unassisted.
Someone explain that to me.
No, because I saw that goal too. It can't
unless a king player.
The league scoring system. It doesn't matter if he touched it, but the league scoring system is flawed. It's imperfect.
Again, so McDavid. I mean, what was even the thought process of this being unassisted? McDavid throws it in front. The other guy. It's a 2-assist goal. Like the other Oiler passes it back to Draisaitl. It's a 2-assist. Clear as day, 2-assist goal.
I don't
understand.
Now the other
sorry,
name,
I'm just
no, it's okay. The other name that popped up, Kev, that we hadn't heard in a while, that I think it was Elliot Friedman that reported it, was John Chaika as a possible option as a GM candidate in San Jose.
Wow. Yeah, we haven't heard from him. I would love to see John get back, just because he was. I liked dealing with him. He was a fun guy. He's smart. How he handled his the situation that caused his exit. That hopefully he's learned from that. But
he was a regular guy to talk to. Kevin's right.
Yeah, he was. He was one of my favorite people to deal with. He looks at the game a little in a modern way, and I don't mind guys that have different views on it. So I hope he gets back. Hope he learns from what happened there, and he's a smart guy. I mean, he certainly knows the game. So it'll be interesting to see. But that's the first mention of him, man. But Mike's right on that.
I know. I hadn't heard a thing, but
it's really the first mention I've heard too. I guess that's all the time we have for today, folks. Thanks so much for watching. Great games again tonight. We didn't even get into them, but we'll talk about them tomorrow. Florida, what happens in Florida and all that stuff. We'll get into it tomorrow. It'll be fun. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. We will talk to you then.
Yeah.